Happy Monday, everybody. It is the first day of August. It's Nicky Stees here. Now, normally you guys know I talk about the Philadelphia Eagles and the Philadelphia 76ers. But after yesterday's news, I decided there's something else I wanted to talk about. So as we know yesterday, NBA legend Bill Russell passed away at the age of 88. So I decided to come on here and share my thoughts on Bill Russell. I could pay a little bit of a tribute to Bill Russell myself. So, Bill Russell, as we know, he's one of the pioneers of the NBA, one of the all-time great legends, one of the early guys that helped pave the way for many other stars that came after him. So, Bill Russell, he played in the NBA from 1956 until 1969. He was drafted in the 1956 draft by the Boston Celtics. And he played his entire career there, and during that run, they won his 13 seasons in the league. They won 11 championships during that run. Let that sink in. 11 championships during his run as a player in the NBA. I mean, that right there is just, that's a feat that's never going to be topped by an NBA player. No matter what, you're never going to see anybody top that feat of 11 championship wins as a player. But that's what Bill Russell accomplished right there. And throughout his playing career, he was known mainly for his shot blocking and his man-to-man defense. Now, he never averaged more than 19 points a game. But you know what? He always averaged over 20 rebounds. He's one of the first to do that. And he was truly a player that was playing ahead of his time in terms of the way he played. And he helped pave the way for many other great big men that came after him. Many other centers especially. To get Bill Russell, a guy who, again, was playing ahead of his time. It was true. He paved the way for a lot of the other great centers that came after him. Just to name a few, guys like the Admiral, David Robinson, Hakeem the Dream Olajuwon, Patrick Ewing, Shaquille O'Neal, even go into the 21st century, Joel Embiid. So yes, Bill Russell paved the way for those guys with his dominant play at center. And he showed that he helped pave the way that centers can be the key force of a championship team. In some cases, when you have that great big man, they are the key pieces of teams. But Bill Russell, like I said, again, 11 championship wins. Let that sink in. And he's tied for the most championship wins by a player in team sports in North America, alongside Henry Richard of the NHL. And he did lead the San Francisco Dons, University of San Francisco, to back-to-back NCAA championships, 1955, 1956. And speaking of 1956, so let's go through that timeline. 1956 to 1957, Bill Russell helped lead the University of San Francisco Dons to their second straight NCAA championship. And then, shortly after that, he was the captain for the U.S. national men's basketball team, the 1956 Summer Olympics. Right after that, remember, this was 1956. There were no dream teams at the time. You didn't have all the top NBA players in the U.S. playing on a team. They didn't allow professional athletes at the time. So this was Bill Russell's one chance at the Olympics because he had just been drafted into the NBA. He didn't play a game yet, so this was his one chance. And he helped come through, and that team, here's a fun fact right here. That team averaged, they won their game, all 8 of their games in the Olympics, and they won by an average of 53.8 points. Let that sink in right there. 53.8 point average wins in the Summer Olympics. And remember, this was not dream teams, all right? This was not like the 92, 96, 2008 teams. No. They weren't using professional athletes. That's how dominant that U.S. men's team was, with Bill Russell leading the way. And he also had his former USF, University of San Francisco, and future Celtics teammate Casey Jones was on that team. And they averaged about 10.9 points per game, including a combined 29 points in the finals when they defeated the Soviet Union, now known as Russia, 89-55. So we got a small glimpse early of the dominance that would come with Bill Russell in the NBA. And then, right after that, 1957 NBA Finals, you know what happened? The Celtics won that Finals, and Bill Russell, in that span, through 56 to 57. NCAA championship, Summer Olympics gold medal, NBA Finals championship. Bill Russell as a player was truly an extraordinary player who was playing out of his time alongside Wilt Chamberlain. And we could go on and on about the different accolades, about how great a defensive player he was, how he forced teams to commit turnovers, which gave the Celtics fast breaks, and all that is true, and all that should be acknowledged. But it's also important to acknowledge that Bill Russell was also someone I'm just going to go ahead and say he dealt with a lot of shit, similar to two MLB legends, Jackie Robinson and Hank Aaron, who had to deal with the color barrier. And they still became legends of the MLB in spite of it. And they did not let it stop them. Bill Russell had to deal with similar stuff with his NBA career. I mean, all throughout his playing career, going back to high school and college, he had to deal with heckling all the time from white people. Especially a lot of people that didn't want him there, simply on the basis of his skin color. He had to deal with that. And he also had numerous instances he was denied service at restaurants or hotels, and he was never afraid to speak out about it. And even with Boston, he had to deal with it from his own fans. Matter of fact, with Bill Russell, not only did Bill Russell have to deal with that from his own fans there, it also got to a point with Bill Russell where his house was vandalized. His house was vandalized at one point, including people destroying his trophies, defecating on his bed, and putting racist graffiti on the walls of his house. There were actually fans that did this to him, and he's considered an icon in the state of Massachusetts. He has a statue in the city of Boston of him. And this is what someone who was supposedly an icon had to deal with. But he never let it stop him. He never let being denied service. He never let the heckling stop him. He didn't let it stop him from going on to accomplish greatness. Similar to Hank Aaron and Jackie Robinson, Jim Brown and many others that had to come through during the color barrier period before the color barrier was completely lifted. And he was part of the first all-black NBA starting lineup with the Celtics. Was it 1963-64? So Bill Russell, he had to deal with a lot of adversity during his time, but he pushed through it and became one of the all-time greats. So his story also can serve as inspiration, not to let hate, not to let oppression, not to let what other people think of you stop you from achieving your goals and fulfilling your dreams. That's something else we can take away from Bill Russell's legacy. Do not let what other people say or try to do stop you from doing what you were meant to do. And Bill Russell, he was meant to be a basketball player, but he did not let any of the crap he had to deal with stop him. And not to mention, speaking of basketball, he became the first black NBA coach. When at the time Boston Celtics head coach, Red Archback, he stepped down. Now, initially, Bill Russell was not his first choice in mind for the head coaching role, but for one reason or another, some of the other candidates he had in mind stepped down, and Bill Russell took that role as head coach. He took that role as player coach, and he had enough respect from his teammates. He had enough respect from the organization where they trusted him to be both player and coach, which he was, and they still won championships, creating the most dominant streak in NBA history during those 13 years, a feat that will never be topped. But Bill Russell had enough trust to be both a player and a coach to get the job done, which he ultimately did. And you talk to the Celtics, we know they're one of the historic Boston Celtics and Los Angeles Lakers, two most decorated franchises in the NBA's history, historically. 11 of those championships the Boston Celtics had came during the Bill Russell era. So he deserves credit for putting the Boston Celtics on the map as the premier franchise, along with the Los Angeles Lakers in the NBA. I mean, still to this day, you get the Lakers and Celtics, particularly the Celtics, they being that big Boston market, they can use that market to get players to sign during free agency and to pull off trades. They have that leverage where they can easily do that. And it's part because of Bill Russell. Now, obviously, he's not the only contributing factor to that, but he is one of the major contributing factors to it. I mean, even yesterday, you had plenty of Celtics play. So you had Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart coming out, tweeting tributes to Bill Russell. Even former Celtics, such as Paul Pierce, even Ray Allen, they were tweeting, paying tribute to this legend. And another thing about Bill Russell, too. One other thing I wanted to say, though. One thing that I feel everyone can also be inspired by Bill Russell. Not just to be great at what they do, not just to go out and achieve greatness at what they do, in spite of everything they have to deal with, in spite of what other people think. One more thing about Bill Russell, he was also a civil rights activist. He stood, you can kind of tell by the title I was going to talk about, but now I'm going to get into that. That's the last thing I'm going to talk. He was a civil rights activist, too. He was in the front row at Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Had a Dream speech. He was there in person when it happened. He, on numerous occasions, called out the oppression he had to deal with, and he wasn't afraid to speak up, even if he knew that other reporters and other fans would hate him for doing it or resent him for doing it. He wasn't afraid to speak up. He's like, hey, this is what's happening to me. This is the oppression and injustice I've dealt with and that other people have dealt with too. That was basically his stance. And he wasn't afraid to stand up for him. Right. And there was an incident in Lexington, Kentucky, where he was set to play in an exhibition game. He and his teammates were denied service at a restaurant. He and his black teammates, and Bill Russell and his teammates took the stand of, no, we're not going to deal with this. We're not going to be denied service based on the color of our skin. No, we're going to go home. And they went home and they didn't play in the game. They boycotted. They didn't care if it created controversy, if other people in the media hated him for it. Bill Russell felt, hey, I was done wrong. I'm not going to come here and play a game in a town where I was done wrong. Or city, but you get the point, though. And Bill Russell, he always stood up for what he felt was right and stood up against what he felt was wrong. And that's something I feel also we should take away from Bill Russell. To have the courage to do great things. To not be afraid of the oppression that might come along or the obstacles that might come along the way. And also Bill Russell's story can inspire people. Stand up when you see injustice. Don't be afraid to call it out. You have the leverage to take a stand against something that was wrong to you, that was done wrong to you. Do so. Take that story of the exhibition game at Lexington where even his teammates refused to play. Specifically him and his black teammates because they were denied service. Take that as one example of standing up for what's right and standing against what's wrong. That's something that Bill Russell did. I feel people should just take away from that and have the courage to stand up to oppression, stand up for what's right. So Bill Russell, there are plenty of great things he did, both on the court, in terms of the way he played, in terms of revolutionizing the game and paving the way for other big men that came after him. He helped break the color barrier. Him, obviously Wilt Chamberlain was another one that played a key role in that. And there were other black players that came along, obviously, but Bill Russell was one of those guys that helped play a role in desegregating sports in North America. Obviously not the only player, but he was one of those guys. And being this is a Bill Russell tribute, I feel it's fair to acknowledge that. And also, we know he stood up against, stood up for what he felt was right and stood against what he felt was wrong. He supported, he was there when Martin Luther King Jr. did his I Had a Dream speech. He supported Muhammad Ali when he refused to enlist in the military service and serve in Vietnam. And, he still stayed true to himself in spite of all the hate he got from fans, from media. And Bill Russell will always have my respect for that. And we also got to acknowledge, too, that because of his dominance and all those championships he's won, they renamed the Finals MVP award the Bill Russell Award. And he presented it to Kobe Bryant. Oh, well, it's still on the subject. I still got something. Bill Russell's taking a stand. When his jersey was initially retired in the 70s, he did not do that. He did not participate in it because of all the oppression to deal with. He was his stance against that, saying, look, I'm not going to do this. And due to the difficult relationship I had with the media, some of it because they didn't like the fact that I stood up what I believed in, he didn't attend his initial Hall of Fame ceremony. Now, he did have his jersey later retired. He attended that ceremony later on. But even then, years later, he still looked at, hey, you guys did me wrong. You didn't support me when I stood up against what was wrong. And I'm not going to participate in the ceremonies for that. And he always stood by that. So I respect Bill Russell, both as a player and as a person, for everything he did, both on and off the court. So I want to finish off on this note. Bill Russell, rest in peace. Thank you for your service as an NBA player and paving the way for many of the other great players that came after you. Thank you for always having the courage to stay true to what you believe in and stand up for what you believed was right and stand against what you believed was wrong. And I always respect you for that, Bill Russell. Everyone watching this, I invite you to feel free, leave your thoughts in the comment section supporting Bill Russell. I invite you to leave your comments, as long as it isn't anything hateful or bigoted. You're invited to leave your comments. Let me know how you feel about Bill Russell. Most of all, to everyone watching, have a wonderful day or night. It's Nicky Steve signing off, and I'll see you for my next vid.